Hey there, welcome to the Self-Worth Renaissance podcast. This is your host, Kirsten Van Wingerden. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Washington State. Please note that what is about to be discussed in this episode is not a replacement for individual therapy and is a collection of musings and thoughts on mental health topics. Hey, and welcome to the Self-Worth Renaissance. I'm Kirsten Van Wingerden, a psychotherapist and your guide on this journey to rediscovering your worth and embracing the best version of yourself. As we wrap up 2024 and prepare for a fresh start, I want to talk about 5 things that we should leave behind to elevate our self-worth in 2025. These are habits, mindsets, and relationships that hold us back from living authentically and loving ourselves fully. So grab your journal, your favorite drink, and let's dive into the work of letting go of what did not work in 2024 and what we want to enter into 2025 with. So let's start with the first thing that I think we should all let go of in 2024, which is toxic comparisons. And what I mean by that is like always comparing your life to someone that is on a totally different life path than you are, and desiring and envying and maybe even having jealousy over their lifestyle. And I'm like thinking about social media, you're just scrolling through, you're looking at someone's perfect vacation photos that seem flawless and their flawless relationship and their shiny new promotion at work or whatever it might be. And you might think, why isn't that me? And comparison just steals our joy. It's known as the thief of joy. And it shifts our focus from gratitude for what we do have into a fixation of what we lack. And then we start looking at all of the negative things in our life instead of having gratitude for the things that are present. And I have a really hard truth for you in that. You're only seeing their highlight reel. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but I think that we have to keep talking about this in our culture today and the way that we are all compared to one another. You're only seeing the highlight reel. You don't really know what's happening on the other side of that. And I want to just share another hard truth that is loving. If a comparison isn't inspiring you into action to better yourself, it's likely not a healthy comparison. I think that there can be healthy comparisons in our lives when we feel inspired by people. We feel like we're just seeing people that have qualities that we really want to emulate. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But, oftentimes comparisons that are toxic keep us stuck in patterns and negative mindsets. That thought process that goes, I'll never have that. Why do they get that? As if we get to decide what someone's worth is and compare it to ourselves. And that's like jealousy and or envy, depending on how intensely you're experiencing it. But I don't want to say that with shame, right? Because I think jealousy is kind of a part of the human experience and can be a signal that there are things in our own lives that we need to develop and pour into. And comparison and jealousy just like go hand in hand often. Jealousy can feel like this pit in your stomach, and it can put pressure on the heart, and it actually can elevate your blood pressure. So it's not great for your health, obviously. So instead of sitting in that jealousy and comparison, which literally have adverse effects on your physical health, dig a little deeper in 2025. Start asking yourself hard questions. And I have a list of questions that I think could be helpful to ask for yourself if you notice that you're starting to get into that comparison trap and you start to feel that like sensation come up. And here are some of those questions. The first question is, what does this person have that I desire? The second question, what steps could I take in my own life to create space for this desire? Thirdly, what is holding me back from chasing after that dream? Fourthly, can I create a tangible action plan to chase after that dream in a way that fits my life? And it's important to note, it's not about their life. This is about your life, right? Like, what is actually the thing that you're craving in your life? And lastly, am I honoring where I am at currently in my own life journey? And am I able to love myself for who I am? Right? So if I don't actually love any part of who I am and I'm just trying to become someone that I'm not, I'm going to lead a life that feels really vacant and really meaningless, right? So I need to pursue a life that aligns with my values and aligns with who I am. And so that's my first point, is to stop comparing and to start using healthy comparisons as a way to grow, and also to recognize that we need to love ourselves first. So in 2025, let's commit to staying in our own lane and celebrating our unique journey, and remind ourselves that you don't have to follow someone else's timeline. Okay, so the next thing that I think we should really leave behind in 2024 is over apologizing. And it's a habit that many of us don't really realize that we have. And I am a repeat offender, so I'm talking to you as much as I'm talking to myself. So have you ever apologized for asking a question, needing help, or even just existing in the world? You know, there's phrases that come to mind like, sorry to bother you, or sorry, but I have a quick question. And they're really ingrained in a lot of us, especially women, and some men too. But, you know, that constant apologizing creates a power difference in our lives where we feel like we are constantly owing to others. And we don't believe that we can take up space. We don't believe that we belong in a room. And, you know, I think the question is, what are we owing to others? And why do we have to apologize for having needs, right? An apology is given when we intrude on someone else in a way that is unkind, or is not thoughtful of their needs, or is like sometimes when we make a mistake, right? Apologies are really necessary and are part of building relationships with people. But, or like, you know, if we bump into someone, like it makes sense to say sorry, like, whoops. But, you know, it doesn't make sense to apologize for just existing, right? Or needing help. So, you know, I think about replacing some of those phrases like sorry to bother you with, do you have a moment now? And, you know, you're still being polite and thoughtful about that other person's needs, but you're also identifying like, hey, I have a need too. You know, constantly apologizing for things that don't require an apology diminishes your confidence and reinforces the belief that you are a burden. So instead of apologizing unnecessarily, try replacing it with gratitude, which seems to be a theme. Apparently, we're going into 2025 with a lot of gratitude, but instead of saying sorry for being late, say thanks for waiting. You know, it shifts the energy from guilt to appreciation, and trust me, it feels so much better. Okay, the third thing on the list of what we are leaving behind in 2024 is people pleasing. So now, being kind and considerate is a beautiful quality. But when you start putting others' needs above your own to the point of neglecting yourself, it can become a problem. And people-pleasing often stems from fear of rejection or conflict, but the cost is high and you end up betraying yourself and self-abandoning yourself in the process. And as we all know, feeling like we are self-abandoning is not a recipe for a happy, fulfilled life, but it is a recipe for intense anxiety. But I just want to give this perspective. People pleasing is a survival instinct, and it's a way to keep relationships feeling safe, even if they have adverse consequences in our lives. And if we are always putting ourselves in positions where we can never be rejected, then we never have to challenge our fear that we might not love ourselves, right? So if I'm constantly avoiding conflict, then I will never experience like, okay, if this person rejects me, do I believe I am worth enough? Like, am I valuable enough on my own? And I actually think people pleasing can keep us in a really shallow headspace. And, I want to say that I say that with grace and kindness, because I think sometimes people pleasing is necessary with certain people in our lives, right? So there's layers to this, okay? But I'm just blanket statementing here. But people pleasing keeps us in a shallow headspace, and it denies us of having deep connection with ourselves and with other people. Now, if you were never taught how to have deep connection with yourself and all the relationships in your life were fairly surface level, then people pleasing will be an easy headspace to jump into. If everyone else is okay, then I'm okay. And we need to start shifting our mindset away from this. I'm thinking about 2025, like learning how to say no and to begin to identify your own needs. And I think that is way easier said than done. I think that could be with the help of like a third party, a mental health professional, could be really helpful to navigate what your own needs are. And it can be an incredibly hard thing to do and can be very painful, especially if you identify that you might be the only person who can show up for yourself in a season. That can be, even harder to admit. And, there's like this muscle that we need to develop in ourselves where we can rely on ourselves and our own abilities. And that can be radically uncomfortable, especially if you were taught to lean into everyone else and to kind of use everyone else as the gauge to know if you were okay, or if you grew up in a really controlling environment and it's hard to trust yourself. So, there's some layers to that and some obstacles that can get in the way. But I really think about like in 2025, learning to set boundaries and saying yes to things that truly align with your values, and remembering to say no to others and saying yes to yourself. Okay, and the fourth thing that we are letting go of in 2024 is unhealthy relationships, or at least owning our part and what we can do to set healthier boundaries in relationships to try to move that unhealthy part of it into a healthier space. So I think it's a really tough one, but it's important to consider for 2025. I think our relationships can really determine the satisfaction and the happiness that we carry in our lives. If we have people around us that constantly drain us, make us feel small, disrespect our boundaries, don't believe in our worth or our value, or, our relationships where we're constantly giving every part of ourselves to that person and receiving nothing in turn, that's going to hold us back. And there's something there's a part of you that feels like that is an okay relationship to be part of. And that needs to be really analyzed going into 2025. And, that could be a friendship, it could be a work colleague, it could be a partner, it could be a parental relationship. But I would really encourage you to consider, like, where are the places in my life that could use some health, right? And how could I be the agent of change in those relationships to create healthy boundaries? And I think it's really hard to let go sometimes when we start looking at these dynamics, because we convince ourselves that things will get better, or maybe we feel guilty for stepping away if that's what we decide we need to do. But here's the truth. You can't grow in an environment that constantly tears you down. There's no way, right? Like I think about a tree growing up from the ground. If it's constantly being chopped down, like there's no possibility for growth. And our psyche, our mental health, our well-being is kind of like that. We need to create spaces where we can grow and we can begin to build that confidence and trust in ourselves. And so in 2025, let's make space for relationships that nurture us, respect our boundaries, and celebrate our worth. Letting go of those unhealthy relationships isn't selfish, it's self-care. And one thing I love to consider too is that when we let go of things that are unhealthy in our lives, relationships that are unhealthy, then we get to create more space for relationships that are healthy. And that is just like an absolutely beautiful thing to consider, is that we have more capacity for the love that we decide we deserve. Okay, and the last thing that we are letting go of in 2024 is seeking external validation. So this one is so important when it comes to self-worth, right? Because if we're always seeking external validation, our self-worth comes from the external world. And I'm curious if you could just sit and think, how often are you looking towards others for approval? Whether that's through likes on social media, compliments, or needing constant reassurance, this habit can actually be really exhausting and disempowering. And if we always rely on other people to tell us what our worth is, we are going to be thoroughly disappointed, because those other people around us are human too, and they're all carrying their own baggage as well. And they might not be the best judge of what your self-worth is. And, I'm thinking about giving that control over to people that are also broken and hurting, and how that could be a recipe for some dysfunction in our lives, right? And so I'm not saying that to say like, oh, we can't also be really appreciative if someone is kind to us and validates something in us that's good, right? We do need those little sweet, tender moments in our lives. But I'm talking about like every part of who I am relies on everyone else. And I just want to tell you the good news. Your self-worth comes from within, and you get to choose that. So in 2025, let's practice affirming ourselves. Instead of seeking that validation from others, ask yourself, what do I think? What do I feel? And strengthen that inner compass that will help you stand tall in your own power. So let's do a quick recap of the 5 things that we're leaving behind in 2024. Number 1, toxic comparisons. Celebrate your own journey. Focus on you. Number 2, stop over apologizing. Replace that sorry with gratitude for what you have. Number 3, people pleasing. Learn to say yes to yourself and set some boundaries. Number 4, unhealthy relationships. Let's let go of what no longer serves you and start creating the relationships that you desire in your life. Number 5, let's stop seeking external validation only. Look inward towards yourself for self-approval. And I want to note that change isn't easy. I know that I'm saying these things and I'm making it sound really simple, but it's not. And I want to let you know that you're worth it regardless. And I'd like you to stop and picture yourself stepping into 2025 feeling lighter, freer, and more aligned with your true self. That's what leaving these things behind will give you. And if this episode resonated with you at all, go ahead and share it with a friend or post your takeaway on Instagram with the hashtag selfworthrenaissance. I love to hear your thoughts and cheer you on in your journey. So thank you for being here, for showing up for yourself, and being part of this self-worth revolution. Until next time, take care, set some boundaries, and know that you are enough exactly as you are.